Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining this EJEC webinar about funding opportunities. We have a lot of people registered, 260, so we will start in 1 to 2 minutes to allow all of you to join. Thank you.
To say good morning, Philip. It's Roy. Good morning, Philip.
Yes, going to all of you. To have a good event, please switch off your mic and your cam for the first part, and you will allow your mic and your video for the breakout rooms. Thank you for your listening. Okay, good morning and thank you to all of you for joining this EJEC webinar about funding opportunities. Indeed, we decided to organize a second one event about this topic after the one we have done in January, because indeed there are several open calls from European Union funding programs. So we will brief you about that and also to discuss several other opportunities. So just show you the agenda of the day. So we have two parts, and the first part, please, it's a presentation of the different funding programs. So for this part, we ask all the participants to switch off the cam and to switch off the mic to allow the presenters to deliver a good presentation and that you can all hear it well. We will start with the first session on research and innovation to present two open calls from different programs, the Innovation Fund, Horizon Europe and CETP, and the LIFE program. The second session is Export in Europe. That indeed, if you want to develop a project in another European countries, we will show you what are the funding programs available, notably from European funding programs. And to complement this activity on Export in Europe, we have also a first session focusing on district heating infrastructure. You will see soon in June, we will publish the EJEC market report, and we will announce more than 250 projects for geothermal heating and cooling systems under development. And to allow this development, of course, you need to develop the subsurface, but you need also to develop the district heating grid infrastructure. We know that is challenging. And for that, we will show you what are the funding programs available. We plan to have all this session in 1.5 hours to allow you after some discussion for the second part. It's a kind of networking and a chat. Of course, you can always use the chat option in this Zoom tool. If you have any comments, you can also ask some questions to the different speakers. We'll try to answer them or during the live event or after the event is closed in a bilateral discussion. So for the networking, we use this Zoom tool with the possibility to have breakout rooms. And we'll have 3 breakout rooms, one on LIFE, the clean energy program of LIFE. We will have a second one on European Union funding programs, so to also discuss what we presented in session 2 and 3. And last but not least, we will have a third room on 3 Horizon Europe codes, which are open, one on exploration technologies, one on smart use of geothermal, and one on innovative applications. If of interest for some of you, you will see that in the first part, we present also the CTP. We could allow also in this breakout rooms number 3, some discussion on the CTP. But first, let's look at these programs. So now coming back to the agenda, after this short introduction, I give the floor to my colleague Sanjeev Kumar, our EdGec Head of Policy, to brief you about the Innovation Fund in the framework of the session 1, Research and Innovation. Sanjeev?
Thank you, Philippe, for the kind introduction. Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just sharing my screen with you now, so just bear with me for a brief second. There we go. My fingers are a bit fiddly first thing in the morning today. But okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to quickly take you through the Innovation Fund. This is an area that my colleagues have been working together to kind of improve, to make it fit for geothermal. And now what we're seeing is a lot of interest, and actually we're starting to see take up of funds. Before I go into the Innovation Fund, it's important to know where it sits in the kind of the larger framework of European legislation. So what you'll see on the left is kind of the Horizon Europe framework. That's kind of the early stages of in the research chain. The Innovation Fund is expressly looking at scaling up commercial scale demonstration of technology so that they're just below the point of market entry to entering into the market. And then from that point onwards, once they're fully proven technologies, then it's a case of just scaling up and rolling them out through the InvestEU and the CEF funds. Okay, so next slide is really a bit of an insight into what the Innovation Fund is. And effectively what it does is it offers grants, and the lucrative nature of this fund is that it offers up to 40 billion in total. It's worth noting that this kind of 40 billion number was based upon a carbon price of 75 euros. The carbon price was 100 euros, it's hovering around the 90 euros. So there's a lot more money within this, and therefore there's a lot more opportunities for the geothermal community to commercially demonstrate their projects. What are the kind of focus areas? You have energy intensive industry, so these are the ones, all of these sectors will be at some stage or another governed by the European Emissions Trading System. So this is power generation, industrial processes, and soon to be buildings and transport as well. But here we see the focus as it stands at the moment: energy intensive industries, renewables, which is the part that covers geothermal. For most energy storage, an area that we can, should, and have already demonstrated and benefited from the Innovation Fund, carbon capture and storage, and of course net zero mobility and buildings. So this is largely the umbrella and the ecosystem that geothermal operates in, so there's a lot of opportunities there. Now, what's the kind of process to go through? First of all, there has to be a feasibility study. So this is, a project that's now looking to show that it can operate at a large scale. So there clearly needs to be a feasibility, and it's at that stage in the awarding process, a payment can be made of up to 40% of the total cost of the project. That has a huge impact in terms of allowing these projects to obtain private sector finance, also support from other national or supranational entities as well. So it's a very important contribution that needs to be there. So this 40% that's paid up front is not dependent upon the actual proven reduction in CO2 emissions. So it's a significant advantage to achieve funding through this process. Once the project has been successfully selected and the kind of award has been made, then it's a case of actually building up the project, and then you have the remainder of the funding that comes in at different milestones, from closure, the financial stage, to the operational, to annual milestones for the specific period of time of the project. And to best illustrate this, we have a couple of examples of projects that have been funded within the Innovation Fund. Now, one of the things I skipped over in the last one is that there are dedicated calls within the Innovation Fund. You have large-scale projects, small-scale projects. There are more and more going to be dedicated project calls. There's a medium-scale project call. One of the things that EDGEC, together with a few other renewable energy sectors, lobbied to have in place. We're very happy around this one. But let's take us through some of the types of projects that were selected, and to give you an idea of where we're going. So we start off with the EVER project. So this was the last of the large-scale projects to be approved by the Innovation Fund. It's to commercially demonstrate the advanced closed loops in conduction-based heating and cooling and power generation network. It's located in Gerres Street in Germany, and I believe the construction has already started, or the initial steps in construction have already started. So this is a significant contribution in terms of advancing geothermal's applicability, testing new technologies, but also really demonstrating how quickly this technology can be scaled up and deliver the services to meeting renewable energy, but also the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that Germany has, that the EU has as well. One of the first projects to be funded, one of the first geothermal projects to be funded, I should say, was Carbfix. Carbfix is based in Iceland. It's a combination of Carbfix and DAN utility CO2, and they're really looking at the scalability of storing CO2 below ground in a basalt formation. So again, through the reinjection process, CO2 is put, crystallized CO2 or mineralized CO2 is put into the water flows and injected back into safe storage below ground. The estimated size and scale of the storage facility is 880 million tons of CO2, so a significant chunk of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions could actually be stored here. The important thing that's been demonstrated is the replicability of this. So again, this opens not just an opportunity for CO2 capture from industrial and other sectors, but it also means that geothermal fits into that value chain, and it provides another income stream for the sector going forward. Recently, a small-scale project that was approved is GeoHeatella, which again is looking at geothermal heat networks, and part of the innovation here is looking at medium depth drilling in order to create heated networks in the newly developing city called Umbrella in the Valta region of Finland. So this is quite an iconic and picturesque region, and geothermal here is really seen as, because of its size and scale, an important contribution to Finland's overall greenhouse gas emission reductions. What you also see from this is clearly the ability to upscale this across the entire urban spaces in Europe. So this is a very important contribution. In terms of the Innovation Fund, in the last series of calls, we've seen that the general bulk of funding is going towards there have been 98 general applications which have been funded, 39 in kind of clean manufacturing, 31 pilots, and of course, electrification of hydrogen has benefited through 71 projects. But the geographical distribution is important, but from our perspective, we've spent a lot of time reforming the innovation fund. The criteria now is much more favourable towards geothermal. The full scale of the technology is recognised. So if you have a project in mind, then this is a good fund to be looking at. Next small scale call will be on the 19th. Will open. Is open now and will close on the 19th of September. So if you are thinking of putting a project consortium together, please do get in touch with us, and we can offer things such as letters of support, and perhaps put you in touch with some of the people who've had successful applications in the past, so that you can learn from their wisdom. We expect a large-scale call to open in November this year, and the impact in terms of the capex is still something that's being weaved out. It's been improved than it was before, but it's certainly something that we can provide guidance on. As I mentioned, a new medium scale category is about to be launched, so we expect to see something before the close of the year. So this fits in between very small projects and the very big projects. And of course, with all of these activities now, there are multiple other EU funding channels which can be used to kind of combine and mesh projects together. So this is a brief overview of the Innovation Fund, and it's enough to kind of whet your appetite for the conversations that we can have in our breakout sessions later on. Thank you, Philippe. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Indeed, what happened is that we will not discuss the Innovation Fund in breakout room, so let's discuss it briefly. I have some question for you, Sanjeev.
Oh, okay.
A question from Peter Johnson. When you were showing the graph of what is the different eligibility of funding, you mentioned feasibility study. So the question is that, so a feasibility study needs to be done before applying for funding. Is it possible to have a feasibility study funded as well?
So the feasibility study, we're looking at something that's already been tested at a pilot stage. So you're really looking at scaling up through the funding here. So one would expect there to be a feasibility study. I think there are already other EU funds that contribute towards feasibility studies. And again, it depends on the size. If you have a much larger project, then there are a series of mechanisms that are available, also capacity building ones for the consumer. So if you're looking at a city-based application, then you have I can't remember off the top of my head the precise name of it. We can send it to everybody in the notes afterwards. But there are funds for customers to have their feasibility subsidised. So that's how one way in which it can be picked up. Mm-hmm. But yes, there is funding in some cases available for feasibility studies. Mm-hmm. But it has to be linked to a viable project that's close, that's seeking additional funding from the Innovation Fund to materialize.
One question is linked to the last two slides you show, but indeed you mentioned that there's an evolution from the starting of what was inner-friendly innovation, what was purely CCS and renewable energy project. After they also look at other technologies, but also they're opening now to manufacturing now. Mm-hmm. And one question from Rodrigue Freire is that, what would you say the TRL of the technology should be in order to apply for innovation funding? So which TRL is to be applied?
We're looking at kind of commercial scale technologies here. So we're really looking in the bracket of 7 to 9, preferably in the higher echelons of that band. I mean, by the stage of TRL 9, you have a mature technology, and you should be looking at penetrating the market. And this is really the bridge. This is originally, it was designed to capture that valley of death between pilot scale and commercial applicability. So the higher the TRL, the stronger the case is going to be. Remember, this has to be an operational project. There's CO2 milestones which are linked to the funding, the 60% chunk of funding that comes afterwards. So it needs to be, one would expect it to be operational at scale.
Mm-hmm. Also, what we could also probably say, Sandy, that we see that there's some flexibility in this rule of market research. because there's the three projects you mentioned for geothermal. They don't are all at the same stage of maturity, and it's interesting to see that indeed, if you have a good project, don't hesitate to liaise with the people in the Russian fund to see the eligibility, because there's some flexibility on that.
And actually, I mean, part of the answer to that is also the name of the fund, it's innovation. So if they see something that genuinely they believe is innovative rather than the level of maturity, then it makes sense to find either funding through the innovation fund, but again, once you reach out to the funders themselves, they may be able to point you to other funds if the technology maturity isn't there. But I think it's important to have a good case to present, a good story to tell with it. But the story is quite important, and more importantly, to link in with with how it's going to deliver the EU's targets, because this is really helping us bring on stream even more technologies to ensure that we meet the binding greenhouse gas and renewable energy targets.
There's a comment, you can answer directly to Xiaoshu Lu. You say that you have you can afford pilot for a small scale project. Let's discuss that in the breakout rooms, maybe join the call on Horizon Europe, and we can discuss that further. Another question is a tricky question, Sandy. Okay. What is the success rate of the 200 plus project applied? Maybe you can show the map. We can show again the map if you are able, because it's going to be interesting to discuss the map. Yeah.
Let me just bring it back up on my screen. Just give me a second. So this was on the map here. You can see, I mean, there's a geographical drivers. From this, you can see the darker greens are Spain and Poland. But I mean, generally, the funds are distributed overall quite well. I think there's another layer of granularity, which is what type of projects have been funded in other activities. What we've seen over the last couple of calls, because of the need to focus on industrial manufacturing, that there was a lot more funding for industrial manufacturing, and therefore you see this in the electrification, the hydrogen, and kind of the CO2 carbon utilization space. In terms of sectors, I think the chemical sector has had a lot of recent calls for funding, but again, geothermal is and the energy sector overall has benefited quite well as well. So, but we do have some granular data that's presented in previous webinars, and we can, that should be available on our website. But if it isn't, we can always provide a link in the follow-up notes.
Yeah, and maybe one answer we can also provide is that in this third call, it was the first time they open also clean manufacturing. So we don't have a clear yet understanding on how they will be assessed in comparison to the traditional project. So the success rate amount we will not know. Probably after summer now, Sunday, we can assume that the Commission and the experts of the Innovation Fund will provide the assessment, and we'll have a better view. But the third call is completely first of a kind, new call, and the success rate is a question. And another parameter, maybe, is also that the size of the funding is also changing with the CO2 price. No?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the innovation fund itself is innovating, so it's growing as the needs and the priorities of the EU change. So, for example, we're in the process of finishing off legislation for updating the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, so the greenhouse gas targets as well. So the scope is going to change in order to better reflect what is needed from the 2030 horizon. So expect the innovation fund to change, expect the funding criteria to become much more fluid, which is why it's so important to have a really good story and make sure that it's plugged into not just the targets that we have, but how does it talk about scalability in the context of the minus 55% emission reduction target.
Yeah, and maybe I just close with the last question, like I see time is running. It was about the country eligible. So I think from the map, it's clear. So it's country from European Union plus Iceland and Norway, but not Switzerland. So it's not all EEA countries, but it's Norway, Iceland, and European Union. And UK also is not joining. I don't know in the future. for men not joining. I think with that, we have to close this session. Thank you, Sandeep. I see that there's still some remaining pending questions. We can go back to you bilaterally to answer this question, but now I think it's time to give a floor to Madeleine van der Velde, our EJEC policy advisor, to present Horizon Europe and the CTP. Madeleine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Hang on one moment, everyone, while I just share my screen. Is everyone able to see it?
We confirm full screen mode.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so today I will be presenting on Horizon Europe and CETP. So this will be following the upcoming deadlines. So yeah, the ones for 2023 that have not already passed and the ones for 2024 that are upcoming, as well as the CETP calls for 2023. So this one for Horizon Europe, these calls are in cluster 5 on climate, energy, and mobility. So the first one is on advanced exploration technologies for geothermal resources in a wide range of geological settings. It just opens at the beginning of May, and the deadline is the beginning of September. And activities are expected to achieve a TRL of 5 by the end of the project. The next one is the smart use of geothermal electricity and heating and cooling in the energy system. The deadline for this one is again in September, the beginning of September, and the TRL is expected to be 7 by the end of the project. Then there's one on increasing the efficiency of innovative static energy conversion devices for electricity and heat and cool generation. This is with a deadline of October the 10th. And the TRL is expected to be 5 to 6 by the end of the project. Another one that's open is the innovative applications integration of geothermal heating and cooling in industry. Actually, sorry, this one actually opens in September. So up and coming, but just to keep in mind, and it closes in January with a TRL of 5 expected by the end of the project. Another one that will be coming up towards the end of the year is this one on emerging energy technologies for a climate neutral Europe. It's opening in December, and then the deadline is next April, and the TRL is expected to be 5 by the end of the project. Another opening around the same time in December with the same deadline is alternative heating systems for efficient, flexible, and electrified heat generation in industry. And the TRL for this one is a bit different. It's 6 to 7 by the end of the project. There's another starting a little bit later in next May with a September deadline and market uptake measures of renewable energy systems. And yeah, there are perhaps some extra ones as well that we have not included in this presentation. They might also be applicable, but more details can be found here. So then the second half of this presentation is on joint calls from 2023 from CETP partnership. So the Clean Energy Transition Partnership is a multilateral and strategic partnership of national and regional research, development, and innovation programs and European member states and associated countries aiming to boost and accelerate the energy transition and to support the implementation of the European set plan. It essentially enables 50 national and regional RTDI program owners and managers from 30 countries to align their priorities, pool national budgets of a total of 210 million euros for 2 joint calls in 2022 and 2023, as well as to implement annual joint calls from 2022 until 2027. So there are 10 call modules, and in 2023, a new and technology specific one for geothermal kind of showed up. So this is the one that you're looking at, kind of highlighted, circled in red here. So the call module, but before we go into that one, I'll go into another one that might also be applicable for geothermal as well, which is it's called module number 6. So if you look here, it's just the one right above. So this one's on heating and cooling technologies. Again, it's with technologies and concepts under smart integration and control, urban and regional planning, environmental sustainability, markets and regulations, stakeholder adoption and engagement, and then with an overall kind of goal of accelerating the heating and cooling transition through innovation and development, integration in the energy system, new approaches, new concepts, demonstrations, and validations. Then there's one on geothermal energy itself. So this one involves environmental, social, and economic sustainability, data statistics and knowledge sharing, public awareness, education, and strengthening the sector, policy, economy, and risk mitigation regulatory framework with an overall goal of accelerating geothermal energy through innovation and development, but also integration in the energy system, new approaches and concepts, of course, demonstrations and validations, and coordination with Geothermica. So what could be interesting on the call calendar for this one is that the opening for pre-proposal submission starts in September this year, so on the 20th. The closing will then be in November on the 22nd. And upcoming pretty quickly here now is, hang on, if I could just... Upcoming pretty quickly, there will be an informational event organized by Tri4. This will be on the 15th of June at 1 o'clock. And I'm sure you can find more information on that online, but we will likely circulate it after the webinar today. But yeah, I think this would be pretty interesting for more information on all of that. So thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Madeleine. And indeed, maybe we can also provide some further comment on. I don't know if you have some question. Let's use the chat also as for the Innovation Fund, because I think it helps us to have a live discussion. So indeed, maybe some comment on CTP. So as you have seen, it's a new instrument started last year in 2022. And indeed, one aspect you have in mind is that the call open in September and the deadline is in November. So indeed, the window is a 3 month. So you need to be ready in advance. And last year, we have seen that indeed in geothermal, many stakeholders were not ready to answer this new funding. They were not aware about the different possibilities, and we have seen few applications. The really interesting aspect is that this year we have a technology-specific chapter on geothermal technologies. It's a bit of follow-up to Geothermica. People maybe are familiar with Geothermica, which was a fantastic instrument for the last nearly 10 years, funded many projects, also at a quite a high TRL. So let's hope to see many projects also submitted for this CTP. Regarding Horizon Europe, maybe Madeleine, you can come back to some slide one by one, because it will allow us also to define better the discussion in the breakout rooms number 3. And of course, people are looking for the PowerPoint. Indeed, all that will be available really soon in our website. So this call on advanced exploration. We lost.
Apologies, hang on one moment.
So the first one on advanced exploration, the call you can see is already open for 1 month. So you can imagine that already many partners are building their consortium. No, sorry. Be back to the first one. Yes, so many people are building their consortium. Deadline is just after summer break. So indeed, people interested have to speed up if they want to develop a project. You could see that to achieve TRL 5, so it's quite low TRL for this activity. It's why also the maximum contribution will be 4 million for a project, and you have only 2 projects to be eligible. So if you are interested by this call, we will discuss it in the breakout rooms number 3. Maybe go to the second slide. So this one has the same time period. You could see it's already open 4th of May, and the deadline will be 5th of September, also just after summer. Here we speak about higher TRL and TRL 7. So you are looking for technologies to be demonstrated. I remember in the chat somebody was mentioning ORC. You can see that it's one of the eligible technology, ORC turbo expanders. When you look at the call topic, is quite large and smart use of geothermal. It will allow the development of several equipment, components, and technology. Look at the call text to see the details. Good to see that 3 projects will be awarded, so it will stimulate different projects. 5 million maximum contribution per project. But if you look at the first call was 2 projects, it will be 3 projects, so 5 projects will be funded this year in geothermal. So good to see the stimulation of research and innovation. And also this call will be discussed in the breakout room number 3. Maybe next slide, Madeline. So this one, we don't spend too much time on it because it's not a technology specific call. It's looking at many technologies. But what is interesting is that you see in the work program of Horizon Europe 23-24 some technology specific for geothermal, the first 2 different, but many technology neutral mentioning geothermal. Just this year, there were one on agriculture mentioning geothermal, which is closed, and this one is also clearly mentioning geothermal as a potential technologies eligible, but it's not only on geothermal, so there will be competition with other technologies or hybrid systems that we want to highlight to you because there's indeed a lot of indirect opportunities. Maybe the next one, Madeline, just to comment it briefly. And I see there are also some comments on the board. This one is for next year, so we mentioned it to you. You see that it's also technology specific for geothermal industry. As it opened in September, we will not have another funding opportunities webinar from EJEC before end of the year. So it's why we want to highlight it to you, because if we organize one, it will be probably November, December, too late for this code opening already in September. You could see here really interesting. Also, 3 projects will be funded. Low TRL, we speak about TRL 5, but okay, let's challenge different technologies to help to decarbonize the industrial sector, and it will be 3 million per project. And this one is also for next year. It's not really mentioning geothermal, but long-term energy storage. One can already think about storage in the underground. So let's also look at that. It's a low TRL, so it's also for basic research. And I think that's all. Or do we still have one more? No, yeah, we have also alternativity instead for efficient, flexible, electrified East generation industry. So again, a code on industry. Again, technology neutral. So the first one we mentioned was technology specific on geothermal project. This one is technology neutral, so it's looking at all sources. You can also think about hybrid systems and so on. Market uptake measures that indeed we have not detailed that front. So market uptake is typically socioeconomic studies. In the past, as EJEC, some of you may remember, we coordinated a GeoEnvy project on environment, a GeoRisk project on de-risking project. Currently, there's a project on geothermal district heating called SAFEA. So it's for next year. It's a bit similar to LIFE. The call LIFE we will present later. So if you have in mind some project, socioeconomic project, market uptake project, it's also to brainstorm. Okay, I just look at if we have some questions. Okay, Matteo wants to see again the slides where we mentioned binary plants. Can you go to one slide? The second slide, the smart. Yep, the smart use of geothermal electricity and heating and cooling. So indeed, so this call is open, Matteo. So it opened the 4th of May, 1 month ago. Deadline is 5th of September. So it's really to work in June, July, August. Why I was mentioning ORC? Because indeed, one of the scope is to increase the variable demand of heating, cooling electricity by integration of adequate installation and equipment, such as heat pumps, ORC, etc., etc. So here we speak not about the commercial project. We speak about project to be demonstrated, and TRL7 is really a demonstration stage. And probably a combination, it could be combined of different geothermal technologies. So it's a pure technology geothermal specific project, so it will be competition between the geothermal actors. And it will be maximum 5 million contribution from the Commission, but it's not preventing the industry to top up also this funding if the project is larger. Yes, I don't know if there was some question. I heard some noise. And maybe also there's Madeline for the first slide on exploration. There are also some comments. I try to answer the comments while presenting. So if there's a possibility from Roderick Fraser, if there's a possibility for exploration and drilling other than the first call, this is so drilling, there's no call on drilling indeed, and it's really a pity because it's the capital intensive part of the general project, and we are looking for indeed more funding on that. In terms of research innovation, there's no, yes, indeed, drilling activity to be funded. On exploration, you will see in the next presentation that indeed here we see other programs that can help to fund exploration. But on drilling, for one, there's nothing. We hope in the future, and especially the innovation fund, to help having more drilling activity funded by European program. But indeed, at that stage, is not really the case. So thank you, Madeline, for this presentation. On CTP, as I mentioned already, if you want to discuss it further, we will discuss that in the breakout rooms number 3, together with Horizon Europe. And now I give the floor to Emile to deliver the last presentation on research innovation, which is about the LIFE program. Emile, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. You should see my presentation now. Okay, so last presentation of this session is about the LIFE program. I'm sure lots of you already know this program. It's basically the use funding instrument for environment and climate action, and it supports environmental and nature conservation projects. Now there is the new LIFE program for 2021-2027, which has a total budget of 5.4 billion. And as you can see, it contains a lot of portfolios, but for us, the most important one is the sub-program that is called Clean Energy Transition. So just some basic information that you can also can further discuss later on in the breakout room regarding LIFE. All LIFE call proposals are published on the CNEA's website, and CNEA is the European agency dealing with this project. And in order to submit one proposal, the reference is the website called Funding and Tender Portal, in which you have to first to register, and which you can find all the relevant information for this course. Now the next very important deadline will be the 16th of November of this year. As you can see, there are several interesting calls for our sector, which have a deadline on mid-November. So a couple of words about the LIFE Clean Energy Transition sub-program. It has a budget of nearly 1 billion over the period 2021-2027. And the scope is facilitating the transition towards an energy efficient and renewable energy based climate neutral and resilient economy. And so by funding coordination and support action across Europe, there are several areas of intervention, such as, for example, building national, regional, and local policy framework. Then, of course, accelerating technology rollouts, new services, business models, but also, for example, the announcement of related professional skills on the market. Another important point is attracting private finance for sustainable energy. And then more in general, supporting the development of local and regional investment projects. So to get a little bit more concrete on that, I'm going to briefly show you some example of projects. So the first one is a project that EJEC is leading. It started last November, and it will last until April 2025. Usually, these live projects are around 3 years. So here the interesting thing is that there was a call, as you can see on the top of this slide, which was called Facing the Increase in Cooling Demand of Buildings in the Coming Years. So the first time that a call was actually focusing on cooling. And on this call, 2 projects succeeded. One, it's our project called Cooling Down. Then we also have another sister project for Cool Life that is similar in terms of the content on studying and trying to enhance renewable cooling solution in Europe. So this project is basically about, as I was saying, accelerating the market uptake of renewable cooling solution. That another important objective is providing an improved and comprehensive understanding of the cooling demand and supply in buildings. And on the other side, also helping cities be more resilient through adverse climate impacts and bridging the gap between renewable cooling stakeholders. So given the lack of attention to the cooling sector in general, the aim that this project has is really to start talking about cooling in general, linking the various stakeholders on this topic, and trying to develop cooling technologies. This project in particular is dealing with cooling from geothermal sources and also from solar heat solution. And then the impact is we are trying to have a big impact, especially on the municipal level. As you know, in the last few years, especially energy grids are overburdened. So it's really needed to find new alternative solution in order to face the challenges that we're going to have in terms of cooling demand and supply in the next few years. Then another example is the project Ready for It. It was from quite a general call, a policy call towards an effective implementation of key legislation in the field of sustainable energy. So the purpose of this project, in which EJEC is one of the partners, is supporting the implementation of the Renewable Energy Directive provisions on heating and cooling, and assist the member states and local authorities in this project. As you probably know, there's a lot of going on in terms of revision of EU directives on the issue of energy. And so what this project is about is basically monitoring this revision and trying also to set some policy recommendation for the member state that are about to implement this new legislation about renewable technologies. And all this action will also be complemented by the development of knowledge sharing platform and toolboxes for public authorities, So again, the action of this project is partially linked to monitoring the legislation and producing policy recommendation, but that trying to be also very practical in the input we can have and for public authorities, especially at national level. But an interesting aspect of this call, as you can see on the top, there is another project that was granted under the umbrella of the same call, even though it's quite different in its practical approach. So just to say that also some general call about policy and effective implementation of key legislation in the field of sustainable energy, as in this case, can lead to different projects. Because, for example, in this sense, another project we are leading, it's called GeoBoost, and it's more technology based, let's say, because it seeks to address the challenging in the expansion of specifically geothermal heat pumps. And so this project is trying to tackle all the barriers and the challenges around this topic, starting from lack of awareness, even rising high upfront capex cost, of course, a lot of the lack of data and monitoring standards for geothermal heat pumps, the insufficient business models and financing at this stage, but also then some issues on the regulatory harmonization and expanding workforce. So as you can see, the calls can be quite general, but then if there are some good proposals, also technology specific, like in this case, these calls can also succeed. And to conclude, maybe just a brief mentioning on the open calls. As I was saying at the beginning, the deadline to keep in mind is the 16th of November. Here I put some examples of open calls that then you can maybe further discuss in the breakout room about live calls. Some examples, I was saying, boosting heat pump deployment through alternative models and skills installers. There is another one on technical support to clean energy transition plans and strategies in municipalities and regions. Another one focused on upskilling and reskilling. Some other more linked to the energy transition of supporting energy transition of European businesses. Other calls on energy community facilities, and another one quite important on district heating and cooling, enabling modernization and full switch through support for investments plans and skills development. But then you, as I said, you can further discuss these calls later on.
Thank you, Emile. Indeed, this live program, I see that there are some questions that they were answered in the chat. As we have a dedicated breakout rooms on it, maybe let's switch on to the second session and keep all the discussion and exchange in the breakout rooms number one. Yes, one. So now we move to the second session. So the first session was to brief you about research and innovation. The second session and the first session together are really to look at funding programs, notably to fund feasibility study, which was another topic discussed before, but also different over infrastructure funding, the district heating, but also exploration and drilling. So Emile, we give you back the floor to present the funding programs for project to be developed in Europe.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. So it's me again. Okay, so in this session, I'll try to give you a general view on all the opportunities linked to funding programs that you can have all over Europe. First of all, I would say a couple of words of the EDGE guide on geothermal funding opportunities that we launched in January, and I'm not sure lots of you already know about. Then I'll focus a bit on new funding instruments as of 2021. And then a panoramic on European structural and investment funds that are also quite important. And then a couple of words on financing of cross-border projects in Europe and the international funding schemes that are also available in Europe. So the EDGE guide on geothermal funding opportunities. It was launched in January this year. And I think it is quite useful for you as it's sort of quite big sum up of all the things we are mentioning today. So we're trying to explain all the different funding opportunities that you can have at EU level, but we're also trying to give some useful example focus on the geothermal sector that can give you the idea of some proposal that succeeded in the past. So we are really trying to compiling more or less all the things that we are mentioning today and beyond. So there is a big part on research, development, and innovation. Then the new funding instruments that I will soon talk about. A perspective also on cross-border project, structural investment funds, also something that we are not covering today because of lack of time, that it's the role of the European Investment Bank, that it's quite important. And then some cross-institutional funding opportunities, and to conclude, an international perspective for the funds that are also available in the EU. This guide is available for EDGE members and can be found on our website. Then, of course, we will share with you some more specific information on where to find it. So to start off, new funding instrument as of 2021. Couple of words on the Just Transition Fund, that it's not often mentioned, but it's I think it's quite key, especially for our sector, especially because it was created to support the coal mining region on the way to become carbon neutral, and it's equipped of 17.5 million. And there's also the possibility for member state on a voluntary basis to transfer some to this fund, some purchases that were allocated under different EU funds. So how it works, basically the Commission provides grants to the member state having identified the territories expected to be the most negatively impacted by the green transition. So in theory, funding is available to all EU countries, but then it's regional or specific in the sense that the European Commission has identified a preliminary list of eligible regions in each countries, and there is then the possibility to for the countries to specify which regions can be eligible for these funds. And the allocation method is based on some socio-economic criteria, like the industrial emissions in the region with high carbon intensity, employment in industry in this region, employment in coal and lignite mining, production of peat, production of oil shale, and oil sands. So just an example of geothermal development through the Just Transition Fund. We have an example from Slovakia. As you can see here, last November, the Commission have adopted the Territorial Just Transition Fund for Slovakia, setting a strategy for investment. And the fund will help Slovakia phasing out from coal extraction and coal-fired electricity power generation by this year. More specifically in the Banska Bystrica region, which is one of Slovakia's least developed region with several districts that depend on industry with very high GHG. So in this case, the Just Transition Fund will help increasing the energy efficiency in buildings, in public buildings, and the use of geothermal energy sources. So here you have a practical example. We also put the link for you if you want to have more information on that. Then in the Just Transition Fund, we have what is called the public sector loan facility, which is a part of the Just Transition Fund that provide subsidized loan. And this is relevant specifically for local authorities looking to finance the development, for example, in our case of geothermal heating and cooling project and infrastructure. So it's a great potential here for our sector because this facility is designed to help public authorities in regions benefiting from transition fund access loans provided by the EIB, of which up to 55% is a grant. So this funding is awarded mainly in two ways. Most of loans are allocated via national processes, but that should be soon available also in EU-wide application procedure with clear criteria for applicants. So then just to show you which are the open calls right now, you can see that in January this year, the Public Sector Loan Facility has launched a call for a proposal. Applicant can submit their loans request to the EIB and a related proposal to the European Commission. Who can apply? It's basically public sector entities or also private bodies with a public service mission. Eligible project must benefit territories and fall within the sector indicated in the fund. And for example, the upcoming cutoff date is the 20th of September. But there will be several cutoff dates per year until 2025. And here I put some then useful link and the call page for you if you want to have more information on that. Another important fund is the EU Modernization Fund. Here it's important to specify that it's limited to some specific countries, as you can see here on the left. But you will probably increase its size for providing financial assistance through additional member states, such as Portugal, Greece, and Slovenia. In terms of numbers, in its second year of operation, it has disbursed a total of 4.11 billion in support of 61 projects in 8 beneficiary countries. You can see it is how it works. Basically, it's EU member state have to submit the investment proposal. Then there is the European Investment Banks that have to confirm the status of the project, which can be a priority in investment or a non-priority investment. And then it's the European Commission taking the disbursement decision, whereas the European Investment Bank disburses the fund, and EU member state implements and reports back to the EU Commission. So as I was mentioning, the key aspect to keep in mind is that for accesses the modernization fund, it's important to engage with national government and pitch your idea to the national ministry, as it's really the only way to benefit from this source of funding. And in terms of future deadlines, next deadline for member state to submit the investment proposal is 15th of August for non-priority proposal and 12th of September for priority proposal. then recently, in June, the Modernization Fund has disbursed 2.4 billion to 31 projects in seven beneficiary countries, and some examples of this project that were awarded, that were funded are like renovation of multi-apartment buildings in Lithuania, supporting cogeneration for district heating in Poland, but also new renewable electricity production capacity, district heating and infrastructure to replace coal-powered energy in Romania. There are some other very important examples linked to geothermal district heating that will be probably touched in the third session about district heating. And so here, as again, is the summary of what is the procedure in order to have to submit the project. So I already mentioned it. I'm not going again through it. And a couple of words on the possibility of fundings linked to the Recovery and Resilience Facility. I'm sure a lot of you already know about it. This is the key instrument at the heart of the Next Generation EU to help member states to emerge stronger from the current crisis. According to that, member states have to submit their recovery and resilience plans to the European Commission. These plans have some key pillars, like especially the energy transition, that can be key also for the implementation of geothermal projects. So it's important to liaise at national level. So companies should reach out to their national governments and should, if possible, to push for geothermal investment to be included in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Every government has a different kind of structure in order to deal with the RRP. Here I put, for example, the Italian way of dealing with that, which is a structure that puts together different ministries and different public institutions in order to deal with that. And it's important to look every one of you as your own countries to see how it works. This was also implemented and augmented through the Repower EU strategy that was launched in May last year. The key thing about funding is that it will provide, it is actually already providing additional EU funding for the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So we're still in time to further push for more geothermal investments, also because the main thing is that there will be the ever financial envelope. It's been augmented by 20 billion in grants from the sale of EU emission trading system allowances. And most importantly, there is now an obligation for the member state to modify the initial plans to also submit a dedicated Repower EU chapter. So during this spring, member states were modifying this chapter. I think we're still in time to have to put some pressure at national level. So companies should still reach out to the national government as soon as possible to implement geothermal project. In this new chapter, there can be either a proposition of new project linked to renewables and energy project in general, but could be also scaling up the project that were already included in the previous version of the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Just to mention that together with that, the European Commission has also issued a guidelines on the Recovery and Resilience Facility Plan in the context of this Repower EU modification. In this guideline, there are several examples of the project that can actually be implemented in this revision. And I found it particularly interesting, one of this example, that recalling the objective of Article 21 of the RFS regulation that was about supporting the value chains in critical raw materials and technologies linked to the green transition. The Commission itself made this example that an example of implementing these new articles can be, for example, a facility for fossil-free lithium production for from geothermal brines. So also this could be a good leverage to have at national level, showing that the Commission itself is kind of thinking about such kind of project when talking about the revision of this chapter. Then a couple of words on the European Structural and Investment Funds. These are basically 5 funds, as you can see here from the slide. For us, the most important to keep in mind are the European Regional Development Fund and the Cohesion Fund. They are allocated via different types of scheme. It's usually direct aids to investment in companies to create sustainable jobs. There can also be financial instruments like capital risk funds to support regional and local development, or technical assistance measures. And for the past multi-annual financial framework, actually member states can still commit funds until the end of this year. I was mentioning that the 2 most important funds for us are the Cohesion Fund and the Regional Development Fund. It's important to know that the Cohesion Fund is like the Modernization Fund, limited only to some countries, which are different from the one from the Modernization Fund. Whereas the Regional Development Fund is it's about region in Europe without limitation. We will see after in session 3 an example of the use of the regional development funds for as regards geothermal district heating. Here maybe just one example for the cohesion fund that regards Slovakia, because Slovakia was implementing its operational program, which are some programs that are developed by each country and region and can be financed either under either the European Regional Development Fund or the Cohesion Fund. And in this case, it was interesting to see that the ministry plans to support the search for sites under exploration to increase geothermal in the Slovak energy mix gradually. So geothermal exploration was mentioned in this operational program that it's partly financed by the Cohesion Fund. Then switching to financing of cross-border projects. Cross-border projects should contribute to the generation of renewable energy from lots of different sources, among others, geothermal energy or the combination of different sources. An example can also be heating and cooling projects. The important thing is that in order to be eligible, there should be a cooperation agreement on any kind of other arrangement between member states. And then to provide cost savings in the deployment of renewable energy for system integration in comparison to a similar project that would be implemented by only one country alone. And then, of course, bringing potential other benefits of cooperation that outweigh its costs. In terms of future calls, I mean, there was a call that ended, what was closed in May and was launched in January. Here I put a link if you want to have a look at the project that were that succeeded in this call. Next call will be expected probably in November of this year, and promoters of candidate project can participate to the call by submitting their application via the dedicated CDRES submission platform. So I'll also here put the link for you to have more information. Then lastly, international funding schemes available in Europe. There are plenty of those, and you can see that the most complete explanation of this is included in the in the EDGE guides that I mentioned at the beginning. Here, I only wanted to mention a couple of those. The first one is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the largest single investor in Southern and Eastern Europe and Commonwealth independent state. So it basically makes equity and loan financing guarantees, leasing facility, and trades finance through a range of intermediaries. These intermediaries include banks in which the EBRD has an equity stake, and it can also provide direct financing and support for SMEs through several loans and equity facility. In terms of budget, the range is from 5 million to 250 million, but the average is around 25 million, and it can fund up to 35% of the total project costs. And here are also the eligible countries, with quite a lot. And just to have an example, a good example can be the expansion of Turkey's largest geothermal power plant. Here, in fact, there were several banks and funds contributing to that, but a major role was also played by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And of course, you can have more information through these links. The second example I wanted to highlight about funding opportunities is the EA grants and Norway grants, as these are a mechanism was set up to funding from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway to reducing development inequalities between these three countries and 16 EU member states that are listed in here. So these funds are granted to foster several policy priorities. However, the big focus is on climate energy and renewable energy, green industry, innovation, and energy efficiency. And this funding can be obtained by responding to a competitive call for tenders. And you have the link for more information. And an example of this is this program in Croatia. So you can see that the essence of this program is to raise awareness and knowledge of the necessity of advantages of increased energy efficiency. There are two main areas of support that are energy efficiency in buildings, and then more specifically renewable energy sources, including also geothermal energy. And so the following, the entities you can see here and individuals contribute to achieving the planned outcomes of the program. So from small, medium, large enterprises to building owners, academia, construction, NGO, and also regional and municipal authorities. So this is it from my side. I know I talked a lot. There are a lot of funds that were worth mentioning. I hope it was more or less clear. Otherwise, you can also then access the presentation. And I remember want to remind once again the EDGE funding guide that it's comprehensive in this sense.
Indeed, thank you, Emil, for this overview. Let's switch now to the last presentation, because indeed we will have a breakout from the number 2 to discuss all this funding. So Sanjeev, we are back to you for presenting a specific instrument to fund the district heating infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. Just waiting for a second. There we go. Okay, so oops, I just uploaded the wrong one. No, this is the right one. Sorry, there we go. Okay, cool. So district heating and cooling infrastructure. There are effectively 3 main funds that are available for this. Three broad funds. There are many. There's a multitude of other ones. You've heard a lot of this from the presentation that Neil has just given you. What I'm going to do here is just quickly go through three examples of district heating, so that you have an idea of what's happened. There's a strong policy push towards much more focus on district heating. There's lots of national funds being developed at the moment. In some places, there are pilot projects. So if you take Belgium here, there are pilot projects announced in the Walloon region to help local authorities zoning and designing spatial plans with increased amounts of renewable energy. 33 million euros were given from the Walloon government, which is one of the devolved regions of Belgium, to associate pilot projects to kickstart the whole geothermal sector there. You see in the Netherlands a lot of funding that's been made available just recently to drive a lot of heat network building. So this is an issue, and this is a space that's going to increase and intensify. You also will recall from the Innovation Fund slide deck that I gave earlier that there's one of the projects was looking at kind of much more deeper medium scale drilling in order to create a localized heat network. So all of this world is continually growing. And there are a multitude of funding that's available today, and we would expect more and more funding to become a bit more precise as time progresses. From the Modernisation Fund, as Emil already mentioned, you have examples where funding was made available for geothermal to be pumped into existing heat networks through the refurbishment processes, the whole conversion away from fossil activities. You have the example of the Resilience Recovery Fund, and here you have Tuscany. Tuscany is quite a fascinating example. An eighth of the funding from the recovery plan was targeted towards upgrading district heating cooling networks in Italy, particularly in the Tuscany region. You can see from this that 25 million euros has been put aside for this, and that there's an approach to look at more and more, much more expansion within the region. So this is an example of the Resilience and Recovery Fund. Remember, it's important to recognise there's the upfront grants, and there's also the equity finance that comes later on, or the loans that come later on within the grant. So we expect this to become much more sophisticated for different types of business model innovation in terms of how one looks at building new district heating systems or heat networks, or actually retrofitting existing ones. Sorry. And then you have the structural funds, the ESEP. And again, the example here is in Germany. And again, you're seeing a lot of movement within Germany using the kind of conventional structural funds, which were agreed in the multi-annual financial framework. So if you take, for example, parts of Munich, a lot of that development is happening with targeted national, regional, and European structural funds to help drive the investment across the space. So, in a nutshell, there are a multitude of funds out there. I think a lot of this depends not so much on what funding is available, but what's the shape of the project, and really where does that fit into the overarching architecture that's available. This kind of, and this is where the guides that we have on funding, but also engagement with us will help in terms of, identifying the potential sources, but also ways in which that needs to be communicated to end users. We know that, for example, within 18 months' time, every local authority with a population of more than 45,000 inhabitants is going to have to start producing a renewable heating and cooling plan, zoning regions, and this is where geothermal heat networks and district heating is going to become much more of a permanent thing. So you'll see bottom-up demand, or people looking towards creating heating networks because of the system efficiencies that go with it, and you will expect to see funding tweaked. So a lot of the European funds that we have at the moment didn't really have heat networks in mind fully when we go through the policy framework. But as we saw in the Innovation Fund, there's a lot of flexibility, and you expect this flexibility to be one of the key things that moves forward. So there's a lot of opportunities now. There's going to be a hell of a lot more opportunities later on. I think I'll maybe give you an example, yes, of Sziged's in Hungary. This has had a lot of really welcome publicity over the last couple of weeks, and it's an example of how the Commission has used its targeted EU budget combined with national funding, private sector funding to really drive quite an ambitious project, but one that can fully be replicated across all countries that have existing district heating networks that are seeking to transition away from fossils. So this is an example less of the technology, much more about demonstrating the acceptability and the scalability of it at a local level. But specifically, this is about meeting a geopolitical crisis that we face at the moment. So whilst this project started in 2019 with the initial pilot projects, this has become a politically iconic project in the context of the energy price crisis, the invasion of Ukraine that's happened since then, which is why this kind of project, this kind of narrative building is definitely going to be applicable in a lot of the countries where you have the modernisation fund, which is effectively the 10 Eastern European countries with the Baltics included, and you're going to expect to see some other countries within that fund. The Just Transition Fund that's not on this slide deck is also another source of looking at funding. So you can see overall that it's not a case of, just want to reiterate, it's not about how much money is available, it's about what type of project and how big that project is going to be for an existing system. And if you're looking at new heat networks, then again, look at what's happening in Finland around the POSO region, and you have some very exciting business model innovation for much smaller heat networks, but all based on geothermal. That's the last slide there. I hope that's helpful. Philippe, maybe I can hand back to you.
No, I think it was quite clear, because indeed many people are looking for developing their geothermal heating project. For the underground, we understand. For the surface, it's more complex. So indeed, we mentioned 4 possibilities. Now the cohesion fund, the structural fund, the motion fund, and the 4th one was RFF indeed. So what I suggest now is
sure. I mean, here we're looking at kind of European funding to kind of support projects. The other thing that we will expect to see over time is the kind of development of business models where you have much more public-private partnerships. I mean, one of the things that we didn't talk about was the kind of development that's happening for district heating in the Netherlands, where you have district heating, but not necessarily for residential sectors. You have it principally driven for the needs in greenhouses in the agri-food sector. And that's different corporations coming together to look at offering long-term guarantees. This is one of the things that happened in France with the Villas-Fella-Canet in the Paris region, where it's a long-term public-private partnership, which has kind of helped provide the business model and the operational aspects, to which then a combination of national and European funding to then move these projects forward. So there's funding. Money, I don't think, is the option, is the barrier here. The real question is how best can we work together to make sure the demand is put forward, and the two things are married together. And what we'll find is that there'll be whatever funding source will benefit on top of whatever the project is looking at.
Yeah, indeed, it was good to highlight that. As I say, we are on time. We were mentioning that the start of the break rooms at 11:30, so maybe we have a 2 minutes break, the time for my colleague to create this breakout room. So don't leave the webinar. You will see that you will have this option to join a specific room. The room number 1 will be managed by Sanjeev to discuss the live project proposals. The room number 2 will be managed by Emil to discuss these funding opportunities and infrastructure. And the last rooms will be managed by myself about Horizon Europe and CTP codes. To be clear, the recording stops now. The discussion during the breakout rooms remains between the people, so we will not record that. I thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for the nice also message in the chat. And let's now move to the rooms for specific discussion.